I never thought my life could unravel so fast, standing outside a rundown hotel on the edge of Chicago, the neon sign buzzing like a warning I didn't heed. My name's Jessica, and at 23, I'm piecing together the shards of a broken marriage, haunted by a love that once felt like a fairy tale, but turned into a nightmare. The cold air stings my skin as I follow my ex, Ethan, into a place that reeks of regret, my heart pounding with a mix of dread and curiosity. What he's about to show me will shatter everything I thought I knew. Will I ever recover from what's waiting behind that door? Picture this. I'm standing in the dim glow of a flickering street lamp outside my tiny Chicago apartment, the cold November wind biting at my cheeks as I fumble with my keys after a long shift. My name's Jessica, I'm 23, and this is my life now, barely scraping by, one day at a time. I've got a cramped studio on the 3rd floor of a building that's seen better days, the kind of place where the radiator groans like it's personally offended by winter. I sling coffee at a little shop down the block, pouring lattes for people who don't even look me in the eye, all while I'm counting every dime to make rent. It's not the life I pictured, not by a long shot. See, I'm recently divorced, and that word still stings like a fresh cut. I'm trying to piece myself back together, to find the confidence I lost somewhere along the way. But it's like trying to rebuild a house after a storm with nothing but broken tools. I was just 19 when I said I do to Ethan, a guy who seemed like he'd walked straight out of a dream. He was 25 then, with a smile that could charm anyone, and a drive that made you believe he'd conquer the world. We met back in high school. Me, the shy girl in the back of history class. Him, the guy who could talk his way out of anything. It was fast. Too fast, maybe. But when you're young and in love, you think you've got forever figured out. We tied the knot right after I graduated, full of plans for a big, beautiful future. House, kids, the whole package. Looking back, those first few months with Ethan after we got married feel like a different lifetime, a sweeter one, before the shadows crept in. We moved into our first place together, a tiny apartment on the edge of Chicago, barely big enough for the two of us. The wallpaper was peeling at the corners, curling up like old secrets, and the floor creaked with every step, but we didn't care. We turned it into our little sanctuary with secondhand furniture we hunted down at thrift stores, laughing as we dragged a lumpy couch up 3 flights of stairs. I can still see us there, painting over the worst of the walls with cheap white paint, splattering it on each other more than the walls, giggling like kids. Some nights, we'd try our hand at cooking, like the time we made spaghetti, and somehow managed to char the sauce into a smoky mess. The kitchen smelled like a bonfire for days, but we just opened the windows, cranked up the old scratched-up radio we kept on the counter, and danced to grainy 80s tunes right there in the living room. Ethan would spin me around, his hands warm on my waist, and for a moment, the world was just us, lost in the beat of some forgotten song. Those were the days when everything felt possible, when love was enough to fill the cracks in our tiny, imperfect life. Ethan worked long hours at a construction site back then, coming home with dust on his jeans and exhaustion in his eyes, but he always had a smile for me, no matter how tired he was. He'd kick off his boots by the door, wrap me in a hug that smelled of sweat and sawdust, and ask about my day. I'd ramble on about whatever little thing had happened at school, or later at the coffee shop, and he'd listen like it was the most important story in the world. But time has a way of changing things, doesn't it? Those sweet memories feel so far away now, buried under the weight of everything that came after. Ethan and I aren't together anymore, but somehow he's still a part of my life, pulling me into moments I never saw coming. It was a gray Saturday morning when Ethan showed up at my apartment out of the blue, his familiar knock rattling my door just as I was pouring my second cup of coffee. I hadn't seen him in weeks, not since the last tense conversation about signing some final papers. My heart did a little flip, part annoyance, part curiosity, as I opened the door to find him standing there, his dark jacket zipped up against the chill, that same old smile tugging at his lips. He didn't say much at first, just asked if I'd come with him for a drive. No explanation, no hints, just a quiet urgency in his eyes that I couldn't ignore. Against my better judgment, I grabbed my coat and followed him to his beat-up sedan. the one that still smelled faintly of pine air freshener and old memories. We drove in near silence, the hum of the engine filling the gaps where words should have been. I kept stealing glances at him, trying to read his face, but he was a closed book, jaw tight, eyes fixed on the road. After about 30 minutes, we pulled into the parking lot of a mid-range hotel on the outskirts of the city, the kind of place you'd pass by 100 times and never notice. The neon sign out front flickered erratically, buzzing like a dying insect, casting a sickly green glow over the cracked asphalt. I frowned as we stepped out of the car, the cold air hitting me like a slap, and followed him toward the entrance. The lobby smelled stale, like old carpet and cheap air freshener, with a faint undercurrent of something sour I couldn't place. A bored clerk barely looked up from his phone as Ethan checked us in, muttering something under his. The ride back from that hotel felt like it stretched on for an eternity. I sat in the passenger seat of Ethan's old sedan, staring out the window as the streetlights blurred into streaks of orange and white against the dark Chicago night. My chest was tight, my throat raw from holding back sobs, and tears carved silent paths down my cheeks. I couldn't wipe them away fast enough. Didn't want him to see how much I was breaking. And Ethan? He just hummed along to some mindless tune on the radio, tapping his fingers on the steering wheel like we'd just come back from a casual dinner, not whatever that was at the hotel. His nonchalance cut deeper than anything else, like a blade twisting in an already open wound. I couldn't even bring myself to speak, to ask what was going through his head, because I was terrified of the answer, or worse, of getting no answer at all. When we finally pulled up to my apartment, I bolted out of the car before he could say a word. I didn't look at him, couldn't bear to meet his eyes, not after what had happened. My legs felt like lead as I climbed the stairs to my studio, the familiar creak of the floorboards echoing in the quiet. I made a beeline for the bathroom, locking the door behind me, as if that flimsy barrier could shut out the memories. I turned on the faucet, letting the cold water rush over my hands before splashing it on my face over and over, like I could wash away the shame. When I looked up into the mirror, I barely recognized the woman staring back at me. My eyes were hollow, red-rimmed, and my skin looked pale, almost ghostly under the harsh fluorescent light. Who was I anymore? How had I let myself get dragged into something so wrong? Later that night, I found Ethan sprawled on my couch like he owned the place, flipping through channels on my tiny TV. My hands were shaking as I stood in the doorway, trying to muster the courage to say something, anything. My voice came out small, trembling, as I asked, "Why did you do this? Why would you put me through that?" Standing there in the doorway, watching Ethan lounge on my couch like nothing had happened, something inside me snapped. My hands weren't just trembling anymore. They were shaking so hard I had to clench them into fists to keep from losing it completely. I'd been rehearsing this moment in my head for days, maybe even weeks, turning the words over and over until they felt like a script I could recite in my sleep. But now that the time had come, my throat felt like it was closing up, like the air itself was too heavy to push out the truth. Still, I forced myself to speak, my voice cracking as I looked him dead in the eye and said, "Ethan, I can't do this anymore. I want a divorce." His reaction was like a punch to the gut. His face twisted, first into raw anger, his eyes narrowing as if I'd just slapped him, then into something like disbelief, his mouth falling open slightly. He sat up straight, tossing the remote aside, and let out a bitter laugh. "A divorce? You're serious? After everything I've done for you, Jessica, you're gonna stand there and act like I'm the problem? You're ungrateful, dramatic. You think you'll ever find someone better than me? Good luck with that." His words stung, each one a dart aimed right at the cracks in my confidence, but I didn't flinch. I couldn't. Not this time. The argument exploded from there, a storm I'd known was coming but still wasn't prepared for. Our voices climbed higher and higher, bouncing off the thin walls of my tiny apartment until I was sure the neighbors could hear every ugly word. He accused me of giving up too easily, of not appreciating the life we'd built, while I threw back everything I'd held in for too long. The way he'd changed, the way he'd made me feel small, the way that night at the hotel had shattered whatever trust was left. At one point, he grabbed a coffee mug from the table and hurled it against the wall, the ceramic shattering into jagged pieces that scattered across the floor like my own broken resolve. I flinched at the crash, my heart pounding. Here I am, months after that final, gut-wrenching confrontation with Ethan, sitting on the worn-out mattress in my tiny Chicago studio, the one I've called home since the divorce papers were signed. The radiator still grumbles like it's got a personal vendetta against the cold, and the single window rattles every time the wind howls outside. But this place, as small and broken in as it is, feels like mine, a hard-won sanctuary where I'm learning to breathe again. Life after the split hasn't been easy. It's like walking on a tightrope with no net below, every step a gamble. But I'm finding my footing, piece by jagged piece, even if the process is slower than I'd hoped. I went back to slinging coffee at the shop down the street, the same one I've worked at for years. The smell of roasted beans and the hum of the espresso machine have become a strange kind of comfort, grounding me when my mind wants to spiral. I've started chatting with old friends again, people I drifted from during the chaos of my marriage. Their laughter, their familiar quirks, remind me of who I was before everything fell apart. I even picked up my graphic design studies again, dusting off dreams I'd shelved when life got too heavy. Each sketch, each digital brushstroke, feels like a small rebellion against the pain, a way to reclaim something for myself. But the scars are still there, etched deeper than I'd like to admit. I flinch at unexpected touches, like when a coworker brushes past me too quickly, my body tensing as if it's waiting for a blow that never comes. Trusting people feels like stepping onto thin ice. I'm always braced for it to crack beneath me. I've spent countless nights replaying that night in the hotel room, the one that shattered everything, wondering if I could have seen the signs sooner. For so long, I blamed myself, carried the weight of guilt like a second skin. But I'm learning to let that go, to forgive myself, to understand that I wasn't the one who broke us. I didn't cause the betrayal. I was just caught in its wreckage. I cut all? Don't forget to subscribe, like, and comment if you enjoyed this story. This will help us create more engaging stories for you.